What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CotAcasT. My name is Bermudez, and I'm the host of the Craft of the Air podcast, the aviation podcast that expands your knowledge in each episode. Join us as we explore the untold world of aviation together. It's gonna be a bone-chilling episode in the world of aviation. Listen, there's moments of breathtaking beauty and moments of incredible danger. But this episode is some moments that defy explanation. Incidents that leave us scratching our heads and wondering what really happened. In this world of aviation mysteries, where unexplained disappearances, unsolved hijackings, and strange occurrences, they continue to intrigue and mystify us. In this episode, I take you on a journey through 3 compelling aviation mysteries in history. We'll explore the theories, examine the evidence, and hear from the experts in the field surrounding Varig Flight 967, the ghost plane Helios Airways Flight 522, and EygptAir Flight 990. Will these 3 mysteries, will they ever be solved? And what do you really think caused these bone-chilling, real life aviation mysteries? Nightmares. Aviation nightmares. Whew. Slow it down. First things first, today's episode of the CotAcasT is brought to you by Craft of the Air. With aviation maintenance training and consulting, COTA is a second you when you need it. Your personal aviation assistant for anything in the field of aviation maintenance. Consulting by COTA has personalized resources that will excel any aviation project or task. They take a personalized approach to each client's needs by offering advice, reports, and data regarding innovative solutions and content to help you make confident decisions. We're the trusted FAA licensed professionals and aviation knowledge experts with industry experience that speaks for itself. Get it from COTA. Are you an A&P student? Job placement or advancement exams? Test and refresh your airman's knowledge with CRAM. CRAM by COTA offers aviation maintenance learning solutions, even simulated FAA written and oral exams. It'll help you pass any aviation maintenance exam, tailored for you by a certified A&P subject matter expert. Visit www.craftoftheair.com. Again, that's www.craftoftheair.com, and learn everything COTA can do for you. Craft of the Air, our craft is of the air. So now, in the very first mystery that we take a look at, Varig Flight 967. Now, Varig Flight 967, this is back, for those of you not familiar, back April 30th, 1979. Actually, almost 44 years to the date, 44th anniversary coming up. Varig Flight 967, it disappeared without a trace. This spell was flying over the Pacific Ocean from Tokyo to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Disappearance of this Boeing 707 and the 6 crew on board, it remains a mystery till this day. Now, according to the official investigation, the aircraft ran out of fuel due to navigational errors and leading it to crash into the ocean. However, there are several theories that challenge this official conclusion. Now, one theory suggests that the aircraft may have been hijacked. Aviation expert John Hainsman explains, quote, "It's not uncommon for aircraft to have been hijacked and taken off course, and the wreckage never found. In fact, it's happened a number of times," end quote. Now, another theory, and we won't get too much into how many aircrafts have been hijacked and taken off course. This has happened throughout history numerous times. But another theory that comes into play is that an explosion of some sort caused the aircraft to disintegrate in midair. However, the problem with this, and I really look towards a quote made by a former FBI agent, Jim Kallstrom. The problem is that there is no evidence, no debris found. Former FBI agent Joe Comstrom, he stated, quote, "If it blew up in the air, there would be debris somewhere, and there was never any debris found," end quote. Now, this lack of debris, it's been a significant point of contention in the investigation. A massive effort covering an area of nearly 10,000 square miles was carried out, but no wreckage or debris was ever found. And this led some experts to question whether the aircraft actually crashed into the ocean. Aviation journalist Christina Gironi explains, quote, "If the airplane had crashed into the water, it would have had to have crashed into a pretty small area not to be found. It doesn't make sense that it's not somewhere," end quote. Strongly agree with this. We also, some experts also suggest that the search area may not have been conducted in the correct area. Very possible. Very simple possible explanation as to why the debris or wreckage was never found. Now, this search area was based on calculations of the aircraft's probable positions, but these calculations were based on assumptions of the aircraft's speed and altitude, and they may not have been necessarily accurate. We're speaking about 1979 and a Boeing 707. Now, with no distress message, no wreckage, or the crew found, conspiracy theorists started to put forward reasons why this aircraft had vanished. Now, it's worth noting, before we get into more possible reasons why this plane may have disappeared, it's worth pointing out that the flight's captain was a highly experienced captain. This 55-year-old Brazilian captain, Gilberto Araujo de Silva, had over 23,000 flying hours and had, get this, survived the crash landing of a Boeing 707, the same plane, outside of Paris in 1973. A Varig Flight, this flight, Varig Flight 820, was going from Rio de Janeiro to Paris Orly. It was inbound when a fire breaks out in the plane's lavatory, and the smoke, it quickly spread through the cabin into the cockpit. And despite the flight crews wearing oxygen masks, they could not read the instruments, so they had to declare an emergency. Araujo de Silva decided to land the plane in an onion field to avoid crashing in a populated area. Smart, heroic call. Sadly, the plane's 123 passengers, most of them had already died of smoke inhalation by then. Araujo de Silva and the other crew and one passenger sitting in the front of the aircraft had survived. Now, despite a tremendous loss of life, Araujo de Silva, he was labeled a hero for not crashing into a populated area. But very interesting that it was the same aircraft and involved in a horrific accident just years earlier. Now, of the most interesting theories, we look at a Russian MiG-25 aircraft and some very valuable paintings. Now check this. A few years earlier, before this crash, Soviet Air Force pilot Viktor Belenko made headlines. This is when he flew a top-secret Foxbat, or MiG-25, to Hagote Airport. This was in Japan. Now, at the time, this MiG-25, it was the Soviet Union's most advanced aircraft, and it was something that Americans really wanted to get their hands on. Viktor Belenko was subsequently granted political asylum in the United States, but the Japanese were reluctant to hand over the airplane, fearing backlash from the Soviet Union. However, they did allow the Americans to do some ground tests on the engines before dismantling that aircraft and sending it back to Russia in a cargo ship. Now check this. When they opened the crates, they discovered that around 20 aircraft components were missing. Now, people speculate that these missing parts were aboard Varig Flight 967, and the Soviet Union intercepted the Boeing 707, and it forced it to land somewhere in Russia. Now, I'd say most of these theories seem highly unlikely. And more likely so, we have maintenance history. And there were concerns about the aircraft's maintenance history. The aircraft had actually undergone maintenance prior to the flight, and there were rumors of problems with the aircraft's fuel system. Now, there's no concrete evidence to support these rumors. The disappearance of Varig Flight 967, it remains a haunting aviation mystery. The search and the answers, they continue to this day. An investigation into the appearance of Varig Flight 967, it concluded that the most likely cause of the plane going missing was sudden depressurization. Yes, the flight crew would have lost consciousness, and the plane would have continued to fly until it ran out of fuel and crashed somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, unfortunately, and which is the most plausible, in my opinion. We're moving on to another bizarre. Helios Airways Flight 522, or more commonly referred to as the ghost plane. Yeah, for those of you not familiar with the ghost plane, on August 14th, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522, this was a Boeing 737-300. A Boeing 737-300. It crashed into the mountains near Athens, Greece, and this was killing all 121 passengers on board. Now, the investigation into the incident revealed a series of bizarre events, leading up to the plane being dubbed the ghost plane. The aircraft was flying from Cyprus to Athens, Greece. This is when air traffic controllers lost contact with the aircraft. And attempts to establish communication with the pilots were unsuccessful. The pilot continued on his course without any signs of life in the cockpit. Now, eventually, the Greek Air Force, they scramble 2 F-16 fighter jets to intercept this unresponsive aircraft. And now get this, the pilots reported seeing the aircraft's captain slumped over in his seat. Slumped over. I can't say that I'm pronouncing it as best as I can with my accent. The captain is slumped over. And there's no editing on this. He's slumped over in his seat, as reported by the F-16 fighter jet pilot. And in his seat, and the co-pilot is in a confused state. The fighter pilots, they attempted to communicate with the aircraft's crew through visual signals and hand signals, but they received no response. The aircraft continued on its course and eventually running out of fuel and crashing into a mountain. Now, the investigation into the incident revealed that the cause of the crash resulted from a series of failures, including human error and technical problems. Are you sure? One of the main factors contributing to the crash was the failure of the aircraft's pressurization system. And this led to the crew becoming incapacitated due to hypoxia. The aircraft's oxygen supply system had been switched off, and the crew was unaware of the failure of the pressurization system. Now, the investigation also revealed that the crew had not completed a pre-flight checklist properly, and the aircraft had taken off with the air conditioning packs set to the manual mode. This should have been in the automatic mode. This meant that the aircraft's pressurization system was not working correctly from the start of the flight. Yeah. Aviation expert and former pilot Patrick Smith states, quote, "There was a sequence of events here that could have been avoided if just one of them had gone differently," end quote. That's a strong statement. Very true. Now, the incident had raised questions about the need for improved training and awareness of the dangers of hypoxia in the aviation industry. This tragedy of Helios Flight 522, it serves as a reminder and the importance of proper maintenance procedures the need for clear communications and procedures in the cockpit. And the ghost plane incident, it remains a haunting aviation mystery. Lessons learned from the investigation, they're going to continue to shape the aviation safety protocols going forward, to this day and going forward. Now, Helios Airways Flight 522, as it happens, was not the first time that an aircraft had crashed following a total pressure loss. Yeah, indeed. In October 1999, a Learjet 35, flying from Orlando to Dallas with 6 people on board, it came down in South Dakota, and this was after flying for 4 hours without any input, after hypoxia incapacitated everyone on board. And this was due to an unspecified depressurization event. Just under a year later, in September 2000, an Australian Beechcraft turboprop was also lost in similar circumstances. This is while I was flying from Perth to Leona with 8 people on board. Now, investigators determined that the plane crashed due to fuel exhaustion after the occupants were incapacitated due, get this, not a pressure loss in the cabin, a deadly pressure loss. So certainly something that's going to shape the aviation safety going forward. And we move into our very last mystery. And we take a focus on EygptAir Flight 990. Now, for those not familiar with EygptAir Flight 990, a lot of people actually are not, less spoken of. We go back to October 31st, 1999. EygptAir Airways Flight 990, it was a Boeing 767-300. It disappeared over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the state of Massachusetts. And get this, it killed 217 people on board. Now, this incident remains one of the most puzzling aviation mysteries in history. Now, this aircraft was on a routine flight, this from New York to Cairo, when, for reasons unknown, began a sudden and steep descent. The aircraft rapidly lost altitude and it crashed into the ocean at a very high speed. Now, on the morning of the incident, the 10-year-old Boeing 767-300ER, operating as Flight 990, it was carrying 203 passengers, 14 crew, and this was an overnight flight to Cairo. This was a scheduled stopover at JFK, and the flight took off from runway 22 Romeo, 22 right, at approximately 1:20 Eastern Standard Time. Now, 23 minutes into the flight, the relief first officer unexpectedly enters the cockpit and he requests to take over from the active first officer. After some reluctance, the active first officer, he gets relieved. Now, moments later, the active captain briefly leaves the cockpit to use the lavatory, and as one person on the controls, the relief officer reportedly says in the recordings, quote, "I rely on God," end quote. And he says this multiple times. Now, this is while the autopilot was disengaged seconds before both engines were put on idle, presumably by the commanding relief first officer. Now, at approximately 1:50 Eastern Standard, the aircraft goes into a very steep dive and near weightlessness was observed. The captain managed to return to the flight deck and inquired about what had happened while he went away, but the captain tried to pull back on the control column while pushing the throttles to increase the power. This was only to realize that both engines, the fuel was cut off to both engines. Yes. Nonetheless, the captain briefly brought the aircraft from the nosedive to an altitude of 25,000 feet. And with the fuel to the engine still cut off and no electrical power on board, the aircraft went into another steep dive, this time with a descent rate of over 20,000 feet per minute. Very bad. The airframe incurred tremendous stress as a result. And that left engine actually disconnects from the aircraft itself. The aircraft went into a brief spiral while still pitching downwards. Now, 32 minutes after taking off from JFK, the Boeing 767, carrying 217 passengers and crew, slams into the Atlantic Ocean, killing everybody on board. Now, the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, investigated that the incident, and it released its final report in March 2002. Now, this report concluded that the cause of the crash was the result of the actions of the aircraft's co-pilot, who deliberately caused the aircraft to crash. I strongly agree with the NTSB. However, the conclusion has been highly controversial and has been contested by many experts and aviation professionals. Now, some have pointed out that the co-pilot had no motive for committing suicide or causing the crash intentionally. One theory actually suggests that there may have been a mechanical failure that caused the co-pilot to take drastic action. The aviation expert and former NTSB member John Goglia states, quote, "It's still possible that there was some mechanical problem that caused the initial upset that the co-pilot was trying to control," end quote. That's all he says. Now, others suggest that there may have been a struggle between the pilots, resulting in the co-pilot taking over control of the aircraft. Yeah, aviation journalist Christina Droney, she explains, quote, "Some believe that there was a struggle in the cockpit, that someone was trying to take control of the aircraft, and that's what led to the crash," end quote. Now, although 70% of the plane was recovered from the water, unlike other mysteries, the cockpit voice recorder was never found. This lack of conclusive evidence and the highly debatable conclusion of the investigation left many questions unanswered. Some criticized the NTSB for handling the investigation and the lack of transparency in its findings. Now, the disappearance of EygptAir, it remains a tragic aviation mystery. Search for answers, they'll continue going forward. That incident, it serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigations, and I would say the need for transparency in investigations and in the aviation industry. As I bring our journey through the aviation mysteries to a close, we're left with a sense of awe, a respect of complexities of air travel, from the disappearance of Varig Flight 967 to the tragic crash of Helios Airways Flight 522. Now, these incidents serve as a reminder of the importance of proper training, maintenance, communication, all of these things in the aviation industry. And while we may never know the full truth behind these events, we can honor the memories of those who have been lost, continuing to strive for safer skies. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope to see you again as we continue exploring the fascinating world of aviation. That about wraps it up for this week's episode of the CotAcasT. If you have not done so already, please check out the Craft of the Air website at www.craftoftheair.com. Again, that's www.craftoftheair.com, and get your free initial consultation today. Craft of the Air, our craft is of the air. Comments or suggestions about this or future episodes, let's get in touch. Visit www.craftoftheair.com, go to contact, and put in the subject CotAcasT. Again, Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the CotAcasT. Be sure to follow and subscribe to Craft of the Air Instagram, Twitter, and the YouTube channel for the latest CotAcasT episode updates. And you can rate and review the CotAcasT. And we're now streaming on Spotify, Apple, Prime, Pandora, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Every platform. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Have a great day. Be safe. And we'll be seeing you soon.